Why do family members who question traditions always have accidents? My cousin Nathaniel died falling down the stairs 3 days after he told Uncle Warren our family reunion rituals were getting too weird. The funeral was beautiful, and everyone said it was such a tragedy how clumsy he'd always been. But I remembered Nathaniel had been a rock climber who scaled vertical cliffs for fun, and I couldn't stop thinking about how someone that coordinated just happened to miss a step right after challenging the family elder. Uncle Warren stood at the funeral, giving this long speech about honoring traditions and how questioning the old ways brought instability into our lives. He kept using words like harmony and balance while describing how important it was that we all participate fully in our annual gatherings without resistance or doubt. The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he was warning the rest of us what happened when you stepped out of line. My Aunt Felicity squeezed my hand during the service and whispered that Nathaniel had always been reckless, that this was bound to happen eventually, but her voice shook when she said it, and I noticed she wouldn't make eye contact with Uncle Warren even though he was her own brother. After the funeral, my mother pulled me aside and told me very seriously to never question the family traditions, to just smile and participate and keep my thoughts to myself. Our family had been doing the same reunion ritual for as long as anyone could remember, gathering every year at the ancestral estate that Uncle Warren maintained. The weekend involved elaborate ceremonies that felt more like religious rites than normal family activities, with specific prayers and offerings and symbolic gestures that we all had to perform exactly right. Warren would lead everything from the main hall while the rest of us followed along, and anyone who messed up or questioned why we were doing any of it would get pulled aside for a serious talk about respecting our heritage. I'd participated my whole life without really thinking about it, just accepting that this was how our family did things. But after Nathaniel died, I started paying closer attention to the patterns of other family tragedies I'd heard about over the years. My grandmother had drowned in the estate lake right after she suggested modernizing some of the rituals. My uncle's first wife had died in a car accident after refusing to participate in one of the ceremonies. My cousin's husband had a fatal allergic reaction at a reunion dinner after he joked that the whole thing felt like a cult. Every single person who pushed back against Warren's leadership ended up dead within weeks, always in ways that looked completely accidental. I started keeping a list on my phone of every family death I could remember, noting the dates and circumstances and whether the person had expressed doubts about our traditions beforehand. The pattern was impossible to ignore once I laid it out chronologically. 17 deaths over the past 30 years, all happening within a month of someone questioning Warren's authority or suggesting changes. The accidents were varied enough that they never looked suspicious in isolation, drowning and falls and car crashes and medical emergencies that seemed like ordinary tragedies. But when you saw them all together with the timeline of descent, it became clear something else was happening. I showed the list to my younger brother Kieran, who immediately told me I was being paranoid and seeing patterns that weren't there. But I noticed he got very quiet when I pointed out that our Aunt Margot had died of carbon monoxide poisoning right after she tried to convince other family members to skip the reunion. Kieran told me to delete the list and never mention it again, and he actually looked scared when he said it. The next family reunion was scheduled for October, which gave me 8 months to figure out what was really happening. I spent weeks going through old family photos and documents, looking for any clue about why Warren had so much control. I found the original deed to the ancestral estate in my father's study, showing it had been passed down through the family for 5 generations with specific requirements attached. The property could only be inherited by the eldest living male relative, who maintained the traditional ceremonies exactly as prescribed by the family charter. Anyone who violated the terms would forfeit all rights, and the estate would pass to the next qualified heir. Reading through it, I realized the traditions weren't just cultural preferences, but legally binding obligations tied to an incredibly valuable piece of land. Warren wasn't just the family patriarch, he was the current legal owner of property worth millions, and his position depended entirely on everyone continuing to follow the old ceremonies without question. I contacted a lawyer named Vivian Ashford, who specialized in estate law, to ask hypothetically about property requirements and whether someone could lose inheritance rights for not participating in family rituals. She explained that unusual conditions on property transfer were legally enforceable as long as they didn't violate public policy. When I described our family situation without naming anyone, Vivian said it sounded like a conditional inheritance where Warren's ownership depended on maintaining the appearance of family unity and traditional observance. She asked if anyone who challenged the conditions had tried to claim rights to the property, and I realized that's exactly what had happened with some of the people who died. My grandmother hadn't just wanted to modernize the rituals, she'd been arguing that the estate should be sold and the proceeds divided among all family members. My uncle's first wife had been a real estate attorney who started asking questions about the legal structure of the property ownership. Every person who died hadn't just questioned traditions, they'd posed a direct threat to Warren's control over a multi-million-dollar estate. And what I was about to discover when I drove out to the ancestral property would prove that some family secrets are worth killing for. Full story